Today's session, it's a really interesting one. We are here with our great panelists to discuss about collaboration with universities and enterprise OSPOs. So I don't know where any one of you was at the Open Source Summit Europe last year in a panel discussion that was related to that one? Okay, because I wanted to give you some context first. So the last year, TODO in collaboration with Curious members started this discussion already. We started to see how OSPOs were supporting academic industry partnerships and in which ways, what meant that. Because we were seeing, well, in Curious, there is a lot of academic OSPOs being inside the research centers, having this kind of discussions and collaboration. So this panel discussion is the part 2. And we have open questions. These were the open questions that we started last year, that we hope that in today's panel we get some inspiration and see what panelists have. And also we will have some time for open questions. I will share at the end of the presentation a slide pool for you to add your questions and discuss together. And also create a blog post with the summary and learnings from today's session. So here's the agenda for today. Here's the agenda that we aim to deep dive for today. So we will see some overview trends, what is the role of the OSPO in industry, but also in academia. What are the challenges that this collaboration can bring in both areas for industry and for academia, and opportunities. And at the end, we will be sharing some resources. So saying that, I'd like to introduce to our panelists today. They come from the 2 different areas. Some of them came from the industry world that has been collaborating already with universities, and we will be sharing their experiences. And also others come from the research institutions and academia that are aiming to share their voice here to see what they need to tell us. Before going further, already, okay, that's it. I think there was one person that wasn't able to make it, but I think I already changed the slide. So I'd like now to introduce. So I think the best way to do this is go a round of presentations, and perhaps also sharing the motivation on why do you think this topic is important for the community.
That's on the wrong seat, huh? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Leslie Hawthorn. I am with Red Hat's Open Source Program Office, where I lead the Industry Community Architecture team, which focuses on Red Hat's relationships with software foundations, open source projects, and industry trade groups as it relates to Red Hat's go-to-market and get-to-market, which is probably not the most interesting thing you've ever heard. However, I get to do a lot of really cool stuff with open source projects that does not have to do with go-to-market and get-to-market, including things like collaborating with various academic institutions around different free and open source software projects that are important to Red Hat's product portfolio, including some new AI projects that the company has launched recently. I've been deeply passionate throughout my entire career about getting university students and pre-university students collaborating around and contributing to open source projects. So I continue that during my day job now as well. So over to you, Chris.
Hi, so I'm Chris. I'm at Bosch's OSPO, or what you would call an OSPO. The past 10 years I was in Bosch Research, the OSPO. And Bosch Research is a large research organization within the corporation, which is interfacing both with academia but also internally, and that's why I have quite some experience in setting up collaborations both within publicly funded projects and otherwise, and what works and what doesn't.
Thanks, Chris. My name is Clare, Dillon. I am the community lead for CURIOSS, which is a community for university and research institution OSPOs. We have about 50 members of folks who work in OSPO or OSPO-like organizations in academic settings from about 26 different or 25 different institutions now. It's a global organization. I'm also a researcher in Ireland in a software research center called Lero. But my background is in the corporate world. But my motivation, I suppose, for being here is that this particular area is a hot topic right now from an academic perspective. Not least because of the funding crunch that's happening in many academic institutions, as you know. So the whole idea of how we can enable and make really successful academic corporate collaborations work is of the utmost importance, highest level attention in academic institutions. And we in CURIOSS certainly, but I think in general, open source is a really great vehicle for making those collaborations both happen faster and be more impactful in the end state. So that's my motivation for being here, is how do we make more of them happen better, faster, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, that's a great motivation. I think I share a lot of that. My name is Cornelius, Cornelius Schumacher. I work as the open source steward at DB Systel, which is the IT daughter of Deutsche Bahn, the German railway company. So I have this fancy title, but effectively what I'm doing, the role is the OSPO of Deutsche Bahn, taking care of all kind of aspects of open source. And a lot of that, of course, is related to collaboration, collaboration with the industry, within the railway industry, with the open source community, but also with universities. And that's a topic which I think is quite important. University is where new things happen, where the future is happening, with people being educated there. So I think that's a good topic to discuss.
Hello, everyone. So, yeah. My name is Ying, and I joined ATH Zurich as a technology and licensing manager in 2021. And before that, I was a scientist in natural sciences, and I also had a JD degree focusing on IP laws. So our OSPO branch at ATH Zurich is even younger than that. We started as an open source software working group in 2026, trying to advise the school board in updating the IP policies to better accommodate the open source related needs from the research community. And to do that, our group reached out to the vast community of researcher students, PhD students, and faculty members from those in computer science who are very experienced in open source maintenance, to those beginners who are interested, for example, from the environmental science and agriculture sciences. And during the process, we learned about their concerns, their interests, as well as collaborations with many difficulties in collaboration with the internal offices like grant office, the library. So we try to, now we have developed into an OSPO branch, trying to lubricate the school, the entire school infrastructure, trying to provide a better support for to streamline open source use, distribution, and even entrepreneurship plans for the research, for the student body especially.
Thank you. So I think with this introduction, you serve really well the overview of trends. That was the first topic, right? Like what is going on in industry, what is going on in academia. And also we went through how OSPOs are, what is the role of the OSPO here, right? Like for instance, how are they getting more involved in providing open source skills and educations across the university campuses and the students, professors in terms of research. But I think the main topic on this panel are about the challenges and opportunities. And I have a question for all of the panelists here, more from the industry side, like what are the motivations for you and that your organization sees in partnering with university invest in open source and to invest in research? What is the your organization's specific motivations to have that?
Okay, we're going in priority order again. At least for my current employer, our mission around investing into working with academic OSPOs and working with student groups around open source is manifold, but I mean, the very obvious one is we're a software engineering organization. We would like to hire intelligent, competent people. If they're already working in open source projects, Red Hat, as a pure play open source company, obviously is capable of hiring someone who already has a good baseline understanding of the work that would be required after they started on the job. I'm one of those people who remembers growing up with an Apple IIe computer lab. No one remembers. Okay, so one person remembers what this is. Red Hat, like every other company on the planet, when we are working with academic institutions around any kind of software project, we're also obviously looking to expose the folks in that academic institution, be it university professors, be it students, et cetera, to our software stack so that they get excited about it and want to use it and hopefully tell their friends as well. I am a diehard open source human, and yet still somehow 30-something, longer than that, let's not talk about it, years later, I've got an iPhone in my pocket because I remember the user experience on that Apple IIe. Get them while they're young, folks.
Well, so in my organization, the primary goal often wasn't building an open source project and trying to build it together with academics. I think there's like two main threads here. So one is we partner with universities just for the research or the innovation, the IP that's being generated classically. And nowadays, if you do research in AI or very software-intensive fields, as you know, you cannot just publish a paper and say that's how it is. People want to see evidence, so typically you have to share code or data or both. And so it's not enough anymore to grant the universities the right to publish papers. They also have to be able to publish supplementary materials. And that's where an OSPO comes in and helps people figure out those different aspects and the different needs of both sides on the table, and also in the IP departments if you look in corporations. So that's the one thing. And the other one is, of course, there's collaborative projects oftentimes, at least in my work, within publicly funded contexts where there is sometimes the result should be open source. And then it also becomes important again to say, okay, we don't just want a code drop after 3 years of a publicly funded project, you want an open source project. How do you make that happen? That's a challenge. We only talk about challenges, right?
We will go then to opportunities,
Okay.
but first challenges.
Okay.
Yep. So I think from my point of view, I would say we don't have a specific reason to invest in open source in collaboration with universities, but we invest in collaboration. So open source is, for us, it's a means to an end. We are not a software company. We are in the business of making trains run and stuff like that. And for that, there actually is a lot of collaboration with universities in all kind of areas. Also, as a large corporation, we have a lot of touch points there. We have partnerships with universities and things like that. And open source, in many of these collaborations, it's not even about software, because it's about, I don't know, the metal or the logistics or whatever of running trains. So there's a lot to be researched there, which is only secondary software at some point. But when it comes to software, then I think we are facing the same challenges as in many other projects, that we know that open source is such an effective way to collaborate and creates quick results, fast results, good results, and to make people understand that and help them to implement that, that's, I think, one of the challenges and kind of the daily business of what we are doing anyway in all kind of areas.
Thank you, Cornelius. And I'd just like to add, just from talking to all the curious members, there are, I suppose, three kind of the reasons that have been touched on here. The first is, as Chris was saying, this idea of the speed to getting collaboration. So, like fundamentally, and this is not casting shade on technology transfer or licensing groups within the universities, but oftentimes corporations feel like if they have to negotiate IP transfers, that it can take an awful long time. So if there's a time critical factor in what they want to do with the collaboration, then open source can be quicker because that pathway is established. The second thing, though, is one which seems to be very difficult to do if you didn't do it through open source, which is where a corporation wants to collaborate with multiple universities. So researchers from multiple universities, if you had to make that IP agreement with multiple universities, it's almost impossible. So that's, if you're doing it with multiple universities, then open source is pretty much the only way to go, because otherwise you're just going to be mired down in the negotiations. And the third one is actually a new kind of thing that is just emerging with the discussions around sustainability. And it's around the idea that if you're paying for some research to be done, but the research project will only last a certain amount of time, that researcher moves on, then how are we going to ensure that the project is sustained over the long term? And now there's exploratory kind of patterns emerging where the corporations fund the project, but then if that's tied into, for example, you know, interns or curriculums or student projects as well, then you have a pathway to get more people contributing to it and maintaining it over time. So this idea of sustainable research is a new kind of trend that I think is emerging.
So from the perspective of universities, I do see, I think at a fundamental level, the university's interests align very well with the open source community spirit. Like universities are interested in freedom of publication, freedom of research, and also we want, many faculties want the academic impact and also the validation of the data and the results by peers. And at the same time, universities' interests can also align very well with those of the companies because universities need research fundings and they need, their talents need an exit, a job market. And at the same time, the companies will need the high quality contributors and potentially future enterprise builders. So I think the fundamental reason, the motivation for university and company collaboration would be this alignment of interests.
Yeah, and I also, because there, I think a few weeks ago, Clare perhaps knows better, this study came in from, I think, several curious members contributed, were surveyed. And there is a section that they share their challenges. So as you can see, some of the challenges they have been sharing. Some of them are also in here. So this survey was, they surveyed like 12 or 13 universities, I suppose, asking about what challenge were they finding when contributing to open source and when implementing open source in universities. So it was interesting, and I will share the resource in the resource section, the link to that. Aside from all these challenges that panelists has been sharing. So with that, I also now would like to ask, what opportunities do you see for this year, maybe for next one, based on the trends, based on the challenges you have mentioned, to collaborate in between industries and academia?
Based on our experience with the student body, we've seen two ongoing trends regarding the university company collaboration. One is through this formal research collaboration projects, which might be the slower version, Claire mentioned. But the good thing is that you can negotiate and take into account all these interests from both parties. Like you can carefully design the license for your output software and also put on some restrictions on the input components. So the good thing is that everything is clarified at the beginning to avoid any future potential of loopholes or risks, and take everything into account. The bad thing is that it's slow. You need negotiation phase every time. And the other trend in terms of collaboration is this university student body contributing to external open source projects as a external contributor. But we are currently having some challenge from this scenario, because normally these corporate open source projects requires the employee of another organization to sign this corporate CLAs, which normally binds the whole organization employee as a whole body. But for universities, we have different branches, offices, departments, and normally only one group wants to contribute to this project. And it will be difficult for us to sign a simple CLA that binds the whole, faculty and student body. And sometimes when we reach out to this project managers, they will say, oh, we don't change these CLAs. So we would advocate if it would be great if you can accommodate, have some flexibility in terms of the CLA aspects.
May I add, I mean, the CLA thing, it's not only for university with different departments. In a large corporation with many, many different legal entities worldwide, we have the same problem. And if you ask somebody, they say, well, just get your act together and manage it properly.
I mean, to add to that, I think that seems to be, for me anyway, the journey. I'm involved with Curious and these sorts of public sector OSPOs for about 5 years now. And the real learning for me is that it's context specific. The solutions you put in place, the best practices and patterns are so often have to be particular to the context of the contributor, of the user, of the project. And I think we have for a long time tried to make everything as simple as possible, with one solution to rule them all. One license is the answer for everything. And that's not always the answer if you're trying to encourage different types of people, organizations, contributions, projects. It's a diverse ecosystem, and we as an ecosystem probably need to have diverse solutions for that, and more awareness then in general about that. And then I will add in one more opportunity, which is building on what Ying was saying, which is for me, and by the way, I fully appreciate the value that the OSPOs can bring into the discussion around how to do the open source most effectively and impactfully for the university. So that is worthwhile time spent. But in general, the universities, in the same way as corporations often have to be educated as to what open source is, there's a broader kind of research consideration that right now is only really associating open source with open research. It's kind of like, well, you have to put some code out there just to get published. But there isn't, I believe, a kind of a well-conceived notion about how open source can actually make for better translation, like into corporate entities. Like that kind of understanding is not there. And I think it's an opportunity that if we help people understand that the only way to get research translated is not by an IP agreement. Like that's not the only avenue. And there's loads of an opportunity, huge opportunity space for research impact in this open source space. That would be a big win.
Maybe if I can add to that, I think one of the big opportunities really is that open source, it's a license framework, it's a collaboration framework, but it's also a culture, and there are values behind that. And establishing this, or even getting people to understand that is a huge challenge in itself, but there's also a big opportunity in there, because it can be a way how to also change a culture, to improve a culture, to make it more effective. And I think that's something, the CLA is a great example, because I think it's really same challenge for any big organization. So, but in terms of culture and how to develop that, I also think it's not that different between what is happening at universities and what is happening in companies, and to how to do this kind of culture transformation, how to do this intentional, or even just support people who want to do that with the right tools. That's I think we can still share more about and learn more about from each other.
Maybe adding on this collaboration thing, there is one context where a third player is missing here. That would be like the public side. If I look at publicly funded project, oftentimes results should be open source, but also oftentimes the funder, the governments don't really understand what they could want, what they should expect, and what types of proposals, if open source plays a key part in it, are acceptable for the governments or the public goods. And I think there's lots of value, both because if it's an open source platform, I think you mentioned it, I don't need another bilateral agreement. If somebody else wants to join during the course of the project, they can't just join because the legal framework it's understood how to collaborate there. But also, sometimes not all parties in these projects have the same level of knowledge or the same level of resources in their OSPOs, if they have any. And so even foundations could play a role in this game, and there are some examples of some such projects where the foundation is a part of the project and then just takes care of this open source culture, infrastructure, setting up the project right, getting the governance right. So at the end of those 3 or 4 years, you have a meaningful result.
Any additions?
I will add. So this isn't necessarily an academic and industry OSPO collaboration specific topic, but one of the big opportunities I see before us, and I think that the industry and academic partnership plays a huge role in this, is just simply what Cornelius was talking about, the instantiation of open source culture and this notion that we can collaborate together across borders, across time zones, across, what is our first language, et cetera. Speaking as somebody who grew up thinking open source was the greatest thing since sliced bread because it brought us all together to create something beautiful together, looking at the ways in which the world is fracturing politically and in many, many other ways. I constantly look back to the cultural lessons that I have learned working in open source software communities and how those can bring us together, unite us towards common purpose. And we don't have to agree about everything, but we can agree to build something beautiful together. And I think teaching the next generation of human beings those lessons is going to be incredibly important as we move forward as a human species.
Yes. And I just wanted to add on to that, because when we think about the next generation, this was inspired by the previous talk about talent. The really cool thing as well, on top of all of that, is that it's not just techies, it's not just comp sci students, it's all the students. They're all into this, like the humanities and the health science people and, people doing history and geography. You get them understanding open source and contributing, then you're opening up that pool of people wanting to create beautiful things together. And that's a huge thing as well. So yeah, that's double time on that.
So we have a few questions from the audience. I'm gonna go to the 2 most voted. The first one, I think this is more, it's to compare between corporations and university views. So what is a concrete path to start a funded project between a corporation and a university? If someone from the 2 angles can share their view.
Hi, I work at a corporation. If you are seeking funding for your open source software project and you would like to form some sort of partnership with a corporation, it sort of starts with the what's in it for me. Every company on the planet gets pitched for funding constantly. There are far more requests for funding than you could possibly ever fund everyone, no matter how worthy the notions are. So understanding what is the benefit to the business that you're approaching for funding or collaboration by collaborating with you, and also being able to articulate not just bottom line value, how is this going to add to a product, et cetera, talk about the public relations value. There are all kinds of ways to articulate how supporting your open source project can be a win for the particular organization you're approaching for funding or collaboration in terms of humans to help you.
From a university's point of view, there are only 2 types of funding: internal funding and external funding. So internal funding, first, external funding can be from company, from government, from grants offices, and internal funding can be from the PI. But I think as a proposal, you just only want to come up with a concrete proposal and then contact the correct agency and someone to review your proposal. That would be the same principle applies.
I'll add that I certainly know this happens in Ireland. I think there are other government funding agencies worldwide that do this, but there are often programs as well that give matching funds if corporations can actually invest in a research project. And that's quite a common pattern. So sometimes Ireland certainly runs kind of like matchmaking events where you bring together the corporations talking about their business problems, the researchers with domain expertise in particular areas, and then they come up together, they go to the government, they get matching funds, and it actually is a very efficient way of just kind of pulling everyone together around it. But there's loads of events and opportunities to have those kinds of conversations.
There's another question. Yeah. So another person said, well, it's more like I will just ask and you can tell. So wouldn't it be a good idea to start teaching students open source as part of their curriculum in the universities and thus making it self-evident?
This is very hard. I'm just going to jump in here. Once upon a time, it was 2010. It was amazing. The National Science Foundation of the United States had just implemented a requirement that in order for you to receive grant funding from this institutional funding body of the United States of America, you had to provide access to every part of what you had published, including your source code for reproducibility requirements, et cetera. So this seemed like the perfect time to get everybody invested in open source software because, hello, that meets almost all of your reproducibility requirements right there. It's literally published. Everyone can see how you did your work. So I was working with several professors at Oregon State University. They had created the Oregon State University Open Source Lab, which for decades was responsible for hosting some of the world's largest free and open source software projects. We hit hard on this problem for years, and fundamentally the biggest challenge was changing curriculum is challenging because it takes a very long time for new curriculum to be approved, and fundamentally professors are not incentivized to update their curriculum. They're incentivized to publish. That gets them onto tenure track. Once they receive tenure, then their motivation to go and change everything that they've done before is low because they have achieved status through going through a certain specific pathway. And then fundamentally, even if you get someone who's really excited about the notion of developing a new curriculum, the academic administrations are not necessarily always incentivized to change the courses that are being offered because that might potentially put revenue for the university in jeopardy. This does not mean this is an impossible problem. This problem has been solved. It has been solved by people like our dear friend Stephen Wally, who's been giving courses at Johns Hopkins University and Carnegie Mellon University as well. But notice that Stephen Wally is a longtime open source software contributor, standards body expert who went into academia to do this teaching, right? This was not a professor who was already there going, let us change the curriculum. TLDR, all of you go become university professors, bring your curriculum with you and we will support you.
I'll add one glimmer of hope, I guess. One glimmer of hope in that, because I absolutely 100% agree with all of those challenges. And I will add in the competition challenge. So you think open source curriculum is a good idea. Let me tell you, there are 50 million people thinking other things are a good curriculum idea as well. And you're competing with all of them. AI being the child of the moment. So, you know, you have to deal with that. But what I would say is, sorry. But the other thing is that the want to create industry wanted skills is high. So the one lever that you can pull and that corporations can play a role in is saying, I need people graduating with open source skills, please. If that starts coming to a university, they will change the curriculum. So that's the lever, I would say, if we want to make that change happen. It has to be industry feedback, skills gap needed, that kind of thing.
Yes, ma'am, we'll get right on it.
So we have time for a last question or a wrap-up question.
All these nice people should ask us things, that's why we're here.
Okay, so not I said wrap-up, yeah.
One thing that I'm kind of missing is academia and corporations, so to say, in a 2x2 pairing. This is understood, but the larger cooperation framework, and in particular with multiple corporations dealing in such environments, is kind of interesting and challenging. And one thing, well, yeah,
There are examples at a European level of consortia that have been funded by the Europe to Horizon 2020, and they are exactly those examples. And they're brilliant examples of small companies, big companies, universities, government, and they're all coming together. And the only way they could do it, that was my point earlier, was through open source, because they couldn't possibly manage it otherwise. Oh yeah, and antitrust law. So for so many reasons, open source is the answer for that. And there are some great examples.
Yeah, this was the publicly funded project thing I was talking about, basically.
So while we're all vaguely hinting around, there is a concrete example here in the room, possibly involving the gentleman who asked the question. Yes, I know, it happens. So there's a research project currently underway to understand how you can put functionally safe Linux into train cars. And this is a collaboration between the German Ministry of Climate Protection, Red Hat. Am I allowed to talk about other people? I don't know. Okay, excellent. Deutsche Bahn, other humans. Open source is your answer. Open source is the answer, and soon when we have to re-kit out all of the rail lines of Europe due to changes in temperature, we will have functionally safe Linux in those trains due to public-private cooperation. So that's pretty cool. I'm a marketer, Sebastian. Just say soon for some definition of soon and go with it. It's amazing.
Just want to add another example, as the Claire and I just mentioned. Recently, ETH AI Center released this Swiss AI LLM. It is a joint project with EPFL AI Center as well as the Swisscom, a company in Switzerland. And in this case, the institution is the leader. Yeah.
Okay, so I think we are on time. Yeah.
Can I just make a call out? We should get a list of these examples, by the way. So it would be wonderful to add this to our wrap-up thing. So if people know of other collaborations between universities, multiple corporations, one-on-one, whichever, but if they're those please do let us know, flag them to us, and we'll add them in to the resource.
Should we create a Google form to capture these details real time after this session?
Yeah, so actually I was about to say, while you were speaking, I saw this QR code and we get a lot of questions that I've been asking. So I think we weren't able to cover all of them, just the most voted ones. But the idea is to create a blog post, the same we did last year, to be at the Curious blog and the TODO Group blog. And even though there's no questions, you are more than welcome to add use cases in this QR code, because these are getting our public, is public, is recorded, and we can take those, and then as a group we can develop a nice blog summary and answer the questions that haven't been answered here.
And add your name if you'd like an acknowledgement in it.
Yeah.
We can't brag about you if we don't know about your project and who you are.
Thank you so much. Thank you.